everybody. I'm Dr. Cynthia Elise Smith, and I'm here again with another essay. This particular essay is one of those ones where I zero in on particular words that we use every day, but when they're used and manipulated within white supremacism, within that ideology, it changes the focus of the word and it can be weaponized. And this word is guilt. Now, we know very well that everyone feels guilt. Guilt is an emotion that is fed by particular behaviors. Now, I'm not a psychologist, I'm an educator. But when that word is used within the context of white supremacism, it changes, because you have to consider whether there is even a capacity for guilt. So without further ado, I'm going to read this essay called Guilt: Justifying Resentment in a Racialized America. When Condoleezza Rice defended what she determined to be the right of white people to admonish any thought of guilt they or their children should experience and express regarding any association or complicity in the plight of Black people and their oppression in American history, her verbal co-signatory agreement was held in their highest esteem and made an official Black contract signed in her hand in support of white supremacism in America, as far as white America was concerned. You see, it only takes one Black person with whom they have determined to be an acceptable voice to agree, and justification is secured. During an interview on the popular television series The View on ABC, she said, "I don't think that's very productive for Black people to feel disempowered by race." Now let's look at that statement for a moment, because then you'll begin to understand the rest of the essay and why I'm talking about guilt as opposed to Condoleezza Rice, okay? But her statements are examples. And it doesn't matter whether she has Black skin or not, okay? And this has nothing to do with whether or not she is entitled to free speech. And this is not an argument about whether she's right or wrong. This is not a debate over what she said. This is an examination of what she said. So she says, I don't think it's very productive for Black people to feel disempowered by race. Well, that goes without saying. But what you do is, when you say things like that, you are making the implication, you are implying that somehow, if Black people feel disempowered, it isn't productive, which is true, but it is their fault. Somehow, the unproductive nature of feeling that way is the fault of Black people, because that suggests they really have no reason to feel that way. Next. I would like Black kids to be completely empowered, to know they are beautiful in their Blackness. Okay. Let's put a full stop on that statement. Because Black people are well past the Black is beautiful thing. We have wanted, since the end of the enslavement and during the enslavement, certainly after, equality, equity, opportunity, and justice. That is what we want. We don't necessarily care whether white people think we're beautiful, or we already know we are beautiful. But her saying, I would like Black kids to be completely empowered to know they are beautiful in their Blackness, She is, again, making some implications, and she is acknowledging that it isn't just skin deep, but it is a state of being. She says, but, and this is the money statement, but in order to do this, I don't have to make white kids feel bad for being white. That statement right there is the money shot. Okay, because no one questions the fact that black people shouldn't be disempowered by race, or for that matter, racism. Being a seasoned orator, Ms. Rice was very careful in the beginning of her statements to stroke the blackness, to stroke that state of being on the arm of black people. That gentle and tender touch testimonial that said how much she would like black kids to be completely empowered to know they are beautiful in their blackness. But she added an important caveat, and that caveat was she didn't have to make white kids feel bad for being white. That is the money statement that resonated among the very people who believe black people are trying to do just that in order to make themselves feel beautiful in their blackness. This smacks of one of the most fundamental dismissals. This is why her statements are actually pretty dangerous and misguided at best. She purposefully dismissed the fact that the ideology of white supremacism, which holds that whiteness as a state of being, and as an assignment of the color white to the pigment on the skins of the people she does not want to feel bad, upset, or guilty, is the number one reason why little black children and adults are disempowered to know they are beautiful in their blackness, denied and discriminated against, and have been for generations. She left out the part that in ensuring the superiority of the little white children, the little black children must live in inferiority. In short, for hundreds of years, white people have made little black children feel bad for being black. Now, for anybody who does not want to have this resonate, if they want to come back, clap back on this, I want you to visualize and draw your attention back to the time of the 60s and the 50s specifically, when little black kids, one in particular, had to be escorted to school by the FBI because her color made her a target for the white people who wanted to kill her just because she wanted an equal education. And they felt that an equal education meant sharing spaces and places with the white people that did not want us. Instead of providing an equal and balanced education for the black children in the schools where they already went. What Condoleezza did was exactly what white people do who support the fallacy of their own supremacy when up against the prospect of truth and the reality of history. She deliberately used what I call the retributive trope, which contends black people want and would seek retribution for their treatment by white people. And therefore, if black people have been made to feel bad, then it should stand that white people should be made to feel bad as well. I don't have to make white children feel bad because they're white. That's a little crazy when you consider the flip side. So that statement was really a projection of what she knows to be true. I don't have to do tit for tat. Retributive. Okay? Of course, that trope is about as old as enslavement and Reconstruction, and is a myth that helped to murder hundreds of thousands of black people during the course of the enslavement and after. Let me explain. For years, there's been a fear among some white people that if given the opportunity, black people would behave in the same manner as was done to them. It continues to be the impetus for their desire to keep us in our place. Moreover, in order to agree with a collective of people born into an ideology of their own supremacy, people who literally fought a war to continue owning other people they decided weren't human, one would have to believe in the capacity for guilt by these people and their descendants in order for them to attach any guilt to the enslavement or its aftermath. Let me repeat that. In order to agree, with a collective of people born into an ideology of their own supremacy, people who literally fought a war to continue owning other people they decided weren't human, one would have to believe in the capacity for guilt by these people and their descendants in order for them to then attach any guilt to the enslavement or its aftermath, which they obviously don't feel warrants guilt within the raw definition as provided in their own study of psychology. How many white people have said, among other things, and these are the ones that come up the most, I never owned any slaves, or that was so long ago, or you just need to get over it, when referring to the enslavement and its aftermath. For white people who ascribe no rational belief in their own accountability regarding the enslavement, its aftermath, or systemic racism, yet believe they are feeling guilt. Now, I want you to pay particular attention to this because this needs to resonate. This needs to go in under that critical thinking cap, and you need to think deeply about what I'm saying here. For white people who ascribe no rational belief in their own accountability regarding the enslavement, its aftermath, or systemic racism, yet believe they are feeling guilt, what they are actually experiencing is not guilt, but resentment over the thought of having to feel guilt, not guilt itself. If we look at what guilt represents, then we can understand why this statement makes sense. What we actually have here are an overabundance of complaints over some mythical desire of black people to assign guilt to white people, for white people to own guilt. See, the last time I looked, the only people assigning shit that, the only people that I know that have always assigned something to somebody or something basically are white people, beginning with the assignment of the color white to their pigments because they were light skinned. And because the inherent metric, the inherent value of that color is, connotes superiority, cleanliness. I've read some of my essays. I go into great detail in a lot of that in terms of color and its representation outside of racism. But I'm digressing, so let me go back to this essay. White people think black people want them to be guilty. To be guilty. Ms. Rice says as much in her statement. I don't have to make white kids feel bad for being white. Nobody's asking her to do that. Nobody has ever wanted or asked or demanded any guilt from white people. Okay? The simple fact is, no one is interested in making white people feel guilty or making little white children feel bad. Being held accountable. Let me say that again. Being held accountable does not require guilt. It requires responsibility. This is what we have always asked, demanded. Some asked, but people like me demand responsibility and accountability. Therefore, it renders the idea of black people as perpetrators of white guilt absurd, since guilt is not necessary in order to dismantle systemic racist practices within institutions. Responsible action is. Accountability is. They don't want to feel that. They don't want to feel accountable. They don't want to be accountable. They don't want to, damn feeling. They don't want to be accountable. They don't want to be responsible. And they don't want to feel any guilt. Imagine how absurd it is to blame the people they oppressed for the very history they created. Yet, this is exactly what is being done. Still, it would appear these same people continue to be offended by references to the responsibility of their ancestors' behavior and feel they are being unjustly blamed for it. If we take a look at the term resentment, we find it fits much more neatly into their experiences as bitter indignation at having been created unfairly, no matter how ridiculous the resentment. Did you get that? Resentment is what they're feeling, people, not guilt. There's plenty of talk over not wanting to experience guilt. See, we don't want to feel guilty. You're going to make little white children feel guilty. We are again the problem. So, because they're just that the desire, they don't want the blame for their resentment either, which also mistakenly passes as guilt. But real expressions of guilt, as explained psychologically, involving negative evaluations of the self, negative evaluations of the self. Come on, this is an ideology that does not, where negative evaluations of the self do not exist in the context of white supremacy. Feelings of distress and feelings of failure. Oh, please. If there are any feelings of failure, that would be from the descendants of the Confederacy. But then again, let me back up on that, because when you really stop and think about it, they're the ones who are writing the history. So they didn't lose much except for the war. So, if we think about it as explained psychologically, involving negative evaluations of the self, feelings of distress, and feelings of failure within the context of white supremacism, its beneficiaries, and the benefits which go along with membership and support of it, have not been the case. Which means the term guilt is like so many terms containing all the misses: misleading, misinterpretation, misrepresentation, and misunderstanding, and is another one of those words in the lexicon of American racialized wording that is typically weaponized for use by white supremacists and their complicit cohorts to justify never being held accountable and never being responsible, generation after generation. And this is that keyword, being. Never being responsible, never being accountable, never being held accountable. The idea of white guilt. White guilt? What the hell is white guilt? What the hell is white guilt? It doesn't exist. It's frankly a myth, because it fails on its own explanation of what it means to be guilty, to feel guilty. The act of being guilty, using their own psychological explanation of it, is diametrically opposed to the ideology of their supremacy. Therefore, in the realm of exceptionalism and superiority, they could never admit to any experience of having guilt, let alone actually experiencing it. Whatever guilt they don't want to experience has nothing to do with an idea that black people are trying to make them feel that way. Quite the contrary. As a matter of fact, white people have always been the worst enemy of themselves ever since they decided to assign the color white as their bond of superiority over everything and everyone but the God from whom their image was forged. It has simply been part of the ideology of whiteness as a state of being to place blame for their own atrocities on the people they oppress. So today, it's supposed to be the fault of black people that little white children growing up today might have to learn what white ancestors and their descendants have been up to. Denying, discriminating, and disempowering little black children in America all these years. As is the case with everything bound within the ideology of white supremacy in America, the key word here is justification. This word, they wear it out. They wear it out. Especially when it comes to injustice for black people. They use it. They use that, what it represents, and they create for themselves justification for just about every single rotten thing that's done in the name of supporting and sustaining this ideology. Justification has been and remains the mainstay of white supremacism. In order for it to be maintained, it must be justified, however flimsily. So guilt becomes another term created fallaciously and masquerading as reality in a nation whose very inception is based on a created fallacy of superiority. Guilt is just another justification being encouraged to defend an actual lack of guilt expressed for generations of overt and covert oppression exacted on Black people. In short, they are not guilty. They do not want to feel guilty, and as long as they are in charge, they want to use the term guilt in the same way that they're now using CRT, for God's sakes, to try to keep the unbleached truth of this nation from ever being completely revealed. And that brings me to the end of another essay. I hope that it resonated with you. I hope that you enjoyed listening and watching. And I hope you come back again. For now, the doctor is in.